අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා.
පැස් සබන් බිලිඳ සම්ට විශේෂයෙන්ම නිෂ්පාදිතයි. SLS ප්‍රමිතිසාධකය සහිතයි.
On the edge, the situation in Ukraine continues to escalate global tensions as last-ditch talks offer a glimmer of hope. Out of the frying pan, Sri Lanka's tourism industry rues what could be a third killer blow, with stranded tourists expecting some cabinet help tomorrow.
Today we are going to put a cabinet paper asking to extend their visas without any charges. So after the cabinet meeting only I can tell you what the cabinet says.
Naming names. Despite Eastern European headaches, the UNHRC begins sessions to file serious charges against Sri Lankan military personnel. Reaching out, Sri Lanka's Cardinal meets Pope Francis, with discussions expected to centre on Easter attack justice delays. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Monday the 28th of February 2022.
100ක් දක්වා ඉසොරි නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලමක් ලබා දේ. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us on AdaDerana English. As the Russian military continues to advance into Ukraine, representatives of the two nations engaged in their first round of peace talks today in a bid to diffuse tensions that many fear could lead to global conflict. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says that his only hope from talks is for Russia to pull back its troops and for an immediate ceasefire. Meanwhile, even though Russia continues to be optimistic about its chances of deflecting the immense damage brought on by a list of new EU sanctions, the impact has been almost immediate on the country's currency and economy.
Russia's offensive against Ukraine continued for a fifth day, which Russian President Putin has termed a special military operation. Early today, the Ukrainian capital Kyiv and its second largest state, Kharkiv, continued to face attacks. An advisor for Ukraine's Interior Ministry revealed on social media that the attack on Kharkiv had killed dozens of people in the city and left more than 100,000 people wounded. According to the country's Ministry of Health, the civilian death toll is currently at 352 and includes 14 children. As Ukrainian soldiers hold their ground against Russian forces, the internet is awash with footage of Ukrainian fathers leaving their families to join the war effort. Under the martial law that went into effect on Thursday, men aged between 18 to 60 have been prohibited from leaving the country. Ukrainian President Zelensky has encouraged people to take up arms and defend the country and promised to provide the necessities needed for anyone willing to fight. In this backdrop, the two warring states began their first round of peace talks in Belarus at midday today, after initial hesitation from the Ukraine's President Zelensky to hold talks in the country. According to the Ukrainian government, the main goal for the negotiations is to gain an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal from Russian troops. As the talks began, the Ukrainian president called for a ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops. Even though Ukrainian military reported that the pace of the Russian military advances had slowed, Russian forces continued to press on. So far, as the war continues to ravage Ukraine, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says that more than 500,000 people have fled since the invasion began. The UNHCR added that 281,000 people had entered Poland, more than 84,500 in Hungary, about 36,400 in Moldova, over 32,500 in Romania and about 30,000 in Slovakia. Meanwhile, as part of the European Union's efforts to isolate Russia and force it to stop its invasion on Ukraine, the EU announced that all Russian flights will be banned from entering the region. all Russian-owned, Russian-registered or Russian-controlled aircraft have been prohibited from entering EU airspace. A similar policy was also adopted by the United Kingdom as well. However, despite the European Union's efforts to cripple the country's economy through sanctions, Russia continues to remain undeterred. The latest on the list of sanctions imposed by the EU was the removal of certain Russian banks from the SWIFT global banking network. With access to the Russian central bank's reserves of $630 billion cut off, the Russian ruble plunged by as much as 40% against the dollar. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Russia plans to ride out sanctions imposed by the Western countries that have sent the ruble tumbling. He said that Western sanctions on Russia are hard, but Russia has the necessary potential to compensate the damage. The Western sanctions forced Russia's central bank to more than double its key interest rate to 20% from 9.5% in a move intended to prevent the ruble from free falling.
Now, the current Russian-Ukraine conflict has sent shivers through Sri Lanka's tourism industry in what has the potential to become a final blow to its chances of recovering from its dual blow since 2019. With Russian and Ukrainian tourists among the country's top 5 markets at present, this industry operators are fearful that the expected growth in earnings could not become a reality. With that, February tourist arrivals from the two nations topped 40,000, the highest numbers since reopening the country. The issue has been compounded by international travel restrictions, leaving them all but stranded here. Tonight's cabinet meeting promises some hope, however, with the tourism minister saying that a free visa extension could be on the cards.
Sri Lanka's tourism industry has been dealt a triple blow from the recent conflict between Russia and Ukraine, its third in the past 3 years. The situation is all the more serious right now given the amount of hope and expectations the industry had been feeling since October last year. Slowly but surely, tour and hotel operators saw a gradual rise to quite meaningful numbers. For example, in December last year, we welcomed 89,506 tourists, according to Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority numbers. Of this number, the Russian market came second only to India at the time, with over 10,000 visitors. In January, meanwhile, arrivals saw a slight drop to 82,327, but still promising. In the month, the Russian market surged past India to top the list of arrivals, with 13,478 visitors, or 16.4% of the total. But according to the latest SLTDA figures, in February so far, there have been 93,582 visitors, with Russia once again topping the list, with 28,392 travellers. Arrivals from Ukraine, however, had just seen a surge in the month, reaching the top 5 list for the first time with 13,039 tourists. Now, with over 40,000 Russians and Ukrainians having arrived in Sri Lanka this month and international travel restrictions in place, their fates remain uncertain. For Ukrainian tourists currently in Sri Lanka, it seems especially difficult given issues with drawing cash back from home. They have only one request: that their visas be given a free extension.
Now, and I don't know what happened with me, because right now I still have my visa, but I don't know what will be next, what will be people in Sri Lanka who they ask me about my country. I know they are crying about my country right now. I know a lot of people like ask me, do I have some food, or do I need something? Right now I am okay, but I don't know what will be next. For Sri Lanka government, for this moment, maybe you can do something with visa, because I know that a lot of people can't pay, people from Ukraine can't pay. Maybe you can help us with this for Ukrainian people.
However, when queried on the subject, Tourism Minister Prasanna Ranatunga offered some hope from tonight's cabinet meeting.
Today we are going to put a cabinet paper asking to extend their visas without any charges. So after the cabinet meeting, only I can tell you what the cabinet says. So,
when also asked to comment on the possible hit to the country's arrivals, he stated that although numbers are the highest they've been since reopening, it's still too early to guess.
Today, I think it will be more than 90,000. After opening the country, this is the highest in February 2022. So it will take time to comment on the forecast in the future.
Meanwhile, hotel owners have been seeing more than 50% of their bookings wiped out through sudden cancellations. And they too echoed the sentiments of the stranded tourists and called for any government help to not only tide over the tourists, but help them hold up their ends as well.
අපි අසරණ වෙලා ඉන්නේ. විශේෂයෙන් යුක්‍රේන සහ රුසියානු ජාතිකයන් අසරණ වෙලා ඉන්නේ. කොහොම වුණත් ආගන්තුක සත්කාර අතින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාව තමයි ඉහළින්ම ඉන්නේ. රජයක් හැටියට මේ ගැන මීට වඩා සොයා බැලිය යුතුයි.
We got in touch with the Sri Lankan ambassador in Ankara, Turkey, who is also accredited to Ukraine, Mohammad Rizvi Hassan, who offered an update on a total of 15 students studying in Ukraine. According to the ambassador, at present there are only 4 Sri Lankan students in Ukraine, as they had chosen to stay back in the country. The ambassador offered a reassurance that all other Sri Lankan students have safely left the country and returned to their families.
As the war in Ukraine continues, the Foreign Ministry of Sri Lanka says that measures have been taken to evacuate Sri Lankan students from the country. Last week, State Minister of Regional Cooperation Taraka Balasuriya said that measures were taken to repatriate students this week once the Ukrainian airports had resumed operations. AdaDerana English News managed to get in touch with the ambassador of Sri Lanka in Turkey, Mohammad Rizvi Hassan, who is also accredited to Ukraine. Ambassador Hassan stated that from a total of 15 students registered via the Sri Lankan embassy in Ankara, Turkey, only 4 students have decided to stay back in the country. He confirmed that 8 of the 15 had safely moved back with their parents to Sri Lanka and other parts of Europe. According to the ambassador, the remaining 3 students had reportedly crossed the border into Poland today. Meanwhile, the Foreign Ministry stated that a total of 40 Sri Lankans registered with the Sri Lankan mission in Turkey are currently residing within Ukraine at the moment. However, the ministry stated that this figure did not represent all Sri Lankans in Ukraine, as many more have not registered with the embassy. They added that many Sri Lankans have been residing in the country for some time and have settled down.
How is Sri Lanka going to mitigate the challenges of the Russia-Ukraine crisis on Sri Lanka tourism? We'll talk after this break.
Big 3.
Now, it's no understatement to say that Sri Lanka's tourism industry has been the most unfortunate victim of global and local events in the past 3 years. Beginning with the Easter attacks in April 2019 and most recently the COVID-19 global pandemic since the latter part of last year. However, there were signs of hope that it would finally see better times. In the past few days, however, we've seen events unfold between Russia and Ukraine, and that have sent shockwaves throughout the world. And once again, with aviation restrictions coming into play for 2 of Sri Lanka's top 5 tourism markets, that's Russia and Ukraine, the industry seems like it's bracing for a third strike. On that note, what the impact is and whether there is still some hope is a good question for our guest tonight. Someone who seems to know quite a bit about the 2 countries. Former ambassador to the Russian Federation, Udayanga Vyuritunga, who is joining me tonight. A very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You have been working, as I said before, in Russia, but again, you've been working to bring in Ukrainian and Russian tourists to Sri Lanka, even during the height of the pandemic. But what is the outlook for Sri Lanka when we talk about these 2 countries who are a source of arrivals to Sri Lanka, one of the top 5?
Yes, now that's that time we are starting bring the Ukraine tourists. That's the 2020 December. We bring the first is the tourism Ukrainian tourists, and that's the start. The private projects. The result of today, we have the number 1 is the Russian tourists. Number 3 is today's country, the Ukraine. But I know very well now is the in country we have around the 4,100 Ukrainians who are now we have some problems with them, but because from that 4,000, 1,000 is the short-term period they came with, spend the 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But they are not planning to stay the 3 months or 4 months.
Right.
But other 3,000, they are planned already be in winter season here. That's mean the 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. With them, we don't have any problem until today. But we have more than 1,000 tourists we need to send back to, not to Kyiv, because no any single airlines today working with going to Kyiv. But we need to send them to Poland, maybe Turkey, maybe UAE. But also big problem because the flights, I mean the Fly Dubai, Air Arabia, Turkish Airline, they are not taking them to flight. That's why even today I came from Hikkadua, and a lot of tourists that are very stressed. But we have the good thing. Now is the Russian tourists, they are coming the number one. Today we have around the 12,000 tourists are inside the country. But I know the summer period, the Turkey is the main country. They are going to every year more than millions. But today they close to Russian tourists. That means where they are going. We have the good chance bring the million Russians to this time to Sri Lanka.
You seem very optimistic even in the current circumstances when Ukraine has been completely transformed into a war zone, and there's Russia in crisis launching offensive there. Our Minister of Tourism, Prasanna Ranatunga too, said that he will be presenting a cabinet paper seeking to extend visas for tourists in the country. But you also say that some of these tourists have had longer term plans here in the country. Again, I go back to new arrivals in the country. How can we plan to mitigate the challenges faced by aviation restrictions to attract those tourists you're talking about who are potentially tourists who will arrive in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, if we are talking about the Russia, we have the direct flights from Moscow to Colombo and 2 Sri Lankan airline flight every week and 4 Aeroflot flight from Moscow. But we don't have any problem with that because all the Russians are coming not through European country. That's why no problem. But from Ukraine, of course, until next month, we don't have single flight, and even the 2 charter flights who are bring the more than 500 tourists, we have the problems to send back to them. But the European Union closed to Russian aircraft to fly European country. Now, this situation, we have the benefit from that.
That's great news for Sri Lanka. I think we've been looking at ways to revive our tourism industry. And meanwhile, a group of Ukrainian tourists in Sri Lanka were seen protesting against the Russian offensive. They're stranded in Sri Lanka, but we see that Sri Lanka is providing all support we can here. We're known as a hospitable nation. And you visited Hikkadua. You're just arriving in Colombo and into our studios after a visit there in Hikkadua. You've been able to speak to these tourists. Tell us a little about what their concerns are right now. I understand they must be having concerns, the Ukrainian tourists as well as the Russians. It's the 2 countries in crisis at the moment.
Yeah, but I think inside the hotel we have some problems. But I've been to more than 20 hotels now. After these 3 days, but no single problem with the Russia and Ukraine, and that's where the demonstration, the Ukrainian tourists who are living the long term in here. That's the Mirissa and Veligama especially. But I think maybe today also 5 o'clock in the Veligama they meeting. But I think 1, 2, 3 days maybe they are continue, but then come in the slowly stop because we don't need to support to any country. Both countries we are the friendly. We need to be the middle. And the Ukrainian who are now inside, they are continue to be inside. That's why the cabinet minister bring the visa restriction, maybe 6-month visa. That means maybe some Ukrainians coming from maybe from other country to live the winter season to Sri Lanka.
What more can we do to support these tourists in Sri Lanka? This must be a difficult time for them.
But inside that means that the visa is the one thing, and same time we need to provide the good internet facility to that area, especially in the Mirissa and Veligam, that they are coming and working in the through online.
Right. Finally, before we go, I also want to talk about in the face of these ongoing sanctions that are being implemented on Russia, imposed on Russia rather, we see that our tea exports may be hit, but Sri Lanka will always find a way, we know. But what is the prospect here? You were a former ambassador there.
But still, the tea problem, we have the problem is to bring the money from Russia. But if you happen in that, I think we have the opportunity to exchange the food. I mean, maybe we can buy the oil and
go into a barter system.
And the tea, the barter system.
Right.
We are using that before, of course, the Soviet Union time, but we can repeat that.
Sure. Thank you very much for your time here in our studios. Former ambassador to the Russian Federation, Mr. Udayanga Veeratunga.
Thank you. Ukraine.
Yes, and Ukraine too. Interesting that was.
I'm the only one ambassador last 9 years is both countries as an ambassador.
You have a lot of experience there, but I wish I had more time to talk to you. But in the future, we will continue to speak to you on the situation. Thank you for your time. We'll take a short break here and we'll return to speak more on AdaDerana English News. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit met with Pope Francis at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican today. His visit to the Vatican is part of his pledge to seek international assistance to deliver justice for the victims of the Easter Sunday attacks that he says has been rife with delays by the Attorney General's Department and political advantage.
The Archbishop of Colombo, Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit, met Pope Francis at the Vatican, the bishop's house confirmed today. Cardinal Ranjit, who is on a visit to Rome, had called on Pope Francis at St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican today. It was previously reported that a meeting was scheduled to be held between Cardinal Ranjit and Pope Francis at the Vatican today, where the duo will discuss the Easter Sunday terror attacks that took place in Sri Lanka on April 21, 2019, and the progress of investigations. The Archbishop of Colombo was expected to take up the issue of delays in providing justice to the victims of the attacks and possible international assistance as well. Meanwhile, last Thursday, the Catholic Bishops' Conference issued a statement to mark 1,000 days since the tragedy. In the statement, the Bishops' Conference said that it was appalled by the failure of the government and the Attorney General's Department to implement the recommendations of the Commission to investigate the attacks. It also alleged attempts to conceal the truth and exploit the tragedy for political gain. Under these circumstances, it added that it sees no alternative but to seek out international assistance to deliver justice. The letter was signed by President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference, Bishop Winston J. Fernando, and his Secretary General, Auxiliary Bishop of Colombo, J.D. Anthony.
The 49th regular sessions of the United Nations Human Rights Council opened today amidst global uncertainty in Eastern Europe. The main focus is set to be on the tensions between Russia and Ukraine, but the stage is also set to place Sri Lanka under the spotlight. According to reports, UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet is set to file charges against 26 Sri Lankan military personnel this time around, with alleged evidence as well. Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires is set to meet Bachelet before addressing the sessions tomorrow.
The 49th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council will be held in Geneva from today until the 1st of April. With the agenda prioritizing the Ukraine-Russia crisis, the spotlight is also set to fall on Sri Lanka as well. In a latest report, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet is set to level serious allegations against Sri Lanka. It is reported that a list of 26 Sri Lankan military personnel have been charged with war crimes, with evidence allegedly gathered against them. It is said that recommendations have been made to impose sanctions on the 26 officials, including travel bans. The report of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on Sri Lanka is due to be tabled on the 4th of April. The debate on Sri Lanka will also be held on the same day. External Affairs Minister Professor G.L. Pires, Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Jainath Kolombage, Minister of Justice Ali Sabri are among Sri Lanka's delegation attending the sessions. Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires is scheduled to address the sessions tomorrow at 11 a.m. Sri Lankan time. The Foreign Minister also reportedly held several bilateral discussion briefings with representatives of member countries of the current situation in Sri Lanka. The Foreign Minister is also scheduled to meet the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, tomorrow.
And the Public Utilities Commission announced today that the public can expect 3-hour power cuts in every zone across the country tomorrow between 8:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. The PUCSL has also urged the public to reduce unnecessary power consumption during peak hours of 6 to 10 p.m. tomorrow, or be hit with a 30-minute extension.
The Public Utilities Commission has announced that 3-hour power cut has been planned for all zones tomorrow. Accordingly, the 3-hour power cut will be imposed in zones A, B and C from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. In addition, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V and W zones will also see 3-hour power cuts between 8:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. However, as the demand for electricity rises to a maximum between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m., the Public Utilities Commission states that if necessary, an additional 30 minutes will be added to the power cuts island-wide tomorrow night. Therefore, the Commission urges the public to reduce power consumption during that period and assist in an uninterrupted supply of electricity. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Energy says that the uploading of 35,300 metric tons of fuel from a ship has already commenced. The ministry also states that a ship carrying 37,000 metric tons of diesel is scheduled to arrive on Wednesday, and the process of opening the required letters of credit has commenced. Further, a ship carrying 28,000 metric tons of diesel and 9,000 metric tons of jet fuel is scheduled to arrive in the island on Friday, the 4th of March, the ministry said.
And that's it from us tonight. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.